My stepmother packed the cooler herself that morning, 2 bottles of champagne, a wheel of brie, and a jar of olives she had shipped from a specialty store in Connecticut. She also packed a change of beneficiary form she had notarized the week before. The yacht left the marina at noon. My stepsister sat on the bow and did not look at me once during the first hour. The water was flat and green and 74 degrees. By 7 that evening, I was in it. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women with good lawyers always get the last word. If you have not joined the family yet, hit that subscribe button. This one is worth staying for. Now let me tell you what happened. The first time Colleen packed that cooler, my father was still alive. He had bought it at a marine supply store in 1997, the year he added a second tugboat to his fleet. It was red canvas with brass buckles, and it weighed about 8 pounds empty. He used to fill it with ham sandwiches and root beer and take it on every trip he made from the dock to whatever vessel needed inspecting that week. When Colleen came into our lives, she replaced the ham with prosciutto and the root beer with prosecco. And my father smiled about it because he loved her and because he did not think the contents of a cooler were worth arguing about. My father's name was Garrett Whitmore. He built a maritime logistics company from one tugboat and a borrowed slip at a municipal dock. By the time I was 12, his company managed cargo routing for half the commercial traffic on the eastern seaboard below Norfolk. By the time I was 18, we had moved into the house on Breer Point, white-clapboard wraparound porch, a view of the harbor where his boats came and went all day long. My mother died when I was 11. Ovarian cancer. She went in 14 months. My father spent the next 7 years raising me alone, which meant I grew up on docks, in tugboat wheelhouses, and in the back row of maritime arbitration hearings where I did my algebra homework while lawyers argued about cargo insurance. He married Colleen when I was 18. She was an event planner from Bridgeport who had organized a fundraiser for the harbor master's retirement. She was 40 at the time, well-dressed, good at conversation, and very skilled at making a room feel like everyone in it had been personally invited. My father liked that about her. He had spent 30 years talking to longshoremen and port captains and did not know how to throw a dinner party. Colleen brought her daughter Jana, who was 16. Jana was quiet, polite, and seemed to exist in a state of constant obedience to whatever Colleen wanted. They moved in. My father expanded the guest wing for them. And every year after that, he took all of us on the annual yacht trip, his tradition since I was 12, when he chartered a 38-footer for my birthday and let me steer for 20 minutes while he stood behind me with his hands on the wheel. My father trusted 2 people with the details of his estate, me and Howard Kessler, his attorney since before I was born. My father died 3 years ago. Heart attack at his desk. One hand on his shipping manifest and the other on a cup of coffee that was still warm when his secretary found him. The will reading was on a Thursday. Howard Kessler sat at the head of the conference table in his office downtown, and Colleen sat across from him in a black dress she had bought the day before. I could tell it was new because the tag was still tucked inside the collar. Jana sat beside her, looking at her phone. Howard read the relevant provisions in the order my father had arranged them. I received the controlling interest in the company through an irrevocable trust my father had established 10 years earlier when he was 53 and in perfect health. The trust was managed by an independent trustee, Howard himself, and included provisions for successor beneficiaries, charitable allocation, and what the legal documents called a spendthrift clause, which meant nobody could pledge, sell, or transfer my interest to anyone else, including by court order. Colleen received the right to live in the house on Breer Point for as long as she wished. She also received a monthly stipend of $12,000 drawn from a separate account my father had funded for that purpose. She received nothing else. She looked at Howard the way you look at someone who has moved your furniture while you were sleeping. "That's it," she said. Howard closed the folder. "That is the entirety of the distribution." Colleen did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She stood up, straightened the hem of her new dress, and walked out of the office. Jana followed her. Neither of them said goodbye to me or to Howard. Over the next 6 months, Colleen began redecorating the house. Small changes at first. New curtains in the dining room, a different rug in the foyer, then larger ones. My childhood photos came down from the staircase wall. My mother's watercolors were replaced with abstract prints Colleen ordered from a catalog. The lock on the wine cellar was changed. The lock on the linen closet was changed. I did not say anything about any of it because my father wanted her in that house and I was honoring his wishes. By March, Colleen had hired her own attorney. I found out because he sent a letter to Howard Kessler. Howard called me that afternoon. He said 3 words, "She's making moves." Howard explained it over the phone that evening. Colleen's attorney had filed an inquiry with the county probate office about challenging the trust on grounds of undue influence. The claim was that my father had not been of sound mind when he established the trust and that I had pressured him into excluding Colleen from meaningful inheritance. The irony was almost architectural. My father created that trust 10 years before he died, during a period when he had just passed a full physical, renewed his pilot's license for his Cessna, and personally negotiated a 9-figure cargo contract with a European shipping consortium. The challenge was meritless, and any judge who reviewed the creation date would dismiss it before lunch. I asked Howard if we should worry. "The trust is ironclad," he said. "But I have been doing this 40 years, Mila. When legal options run out, people get creative." I did not fully understand what he meant at the time. In the weeks that followed, Colleen became warmer. She started cooking dinner on Sundays. Roast chicken, potatoes, a salad with the good olive oil. She suggested a spa weekend for the 3 of us. She began calling me sweetheart in the hallway, which she had never done before. She brought me coffee every morning for 2 weeks straight. Same cup, same time, same smile. She set it on the counter and said, "Good morning, sweetheart," and waited until I took a sip before she left the kitchen. I noticed the change. I thought she was accepting reality. Looking back, I should have seen the pattern. Every act of warmth was a measurement. She was calculating how much trust she needed to build before she could spend it all in one afternoon. In late May, Colleen suggested the annual yacht trip. "We have not done one since your father's death," she said it gently over Sunday dinner. "It has been 3 years since your father passed. Let us do it right this time. Just the 3 of us, you, me, and Jana." Jana looked up from her plate. Something crossed her face. Not quite fear, not quite recognition. It was gone before I could name it. I said yes. I said yes because my father loved that trip more than any tradition he ever kept, and I was not ready to let it die. I should have let it die. The morning of the trip, I packed a canvas bag with sunscreen, a novel I had been meaning to finish since February, and my father's old compass. It was a brass Brunton he had bought in 1989 from a retired merchant captain in Galveston. The man had told him, "It will not tell you where to go. It will tell you which way you are already facing." My father carried it on every voyage after that, and I had carried it in my jacket pocket since the day he died. At the marina, the yacht was already prepared. Colleen had arrived early. She was standing on the dock in white linen pants and a new watch I had not seen before, gold with a thin band. The cooler was at her feet, packed and buckled. 2 crew members waited on the stern deck. I did not recognize either of them. "Where is Captain Engel?" I asked. "On vacation," Colleen said. "I hired replacements. They came highly recommended." The 2 men nodded at me without introducing themselves. One was stocky with a sunburn. The other was thin and wore mirrored sunglasses that reflected the dock behind me. Neither wore a uniform. Neither wore a name tag. I stepped aboard. Jana was already on the bow, sitting in one of the cushioned chairs with her phone in her hands, scrolling. She did not look up when I boarded. She did not say good morning. The only acknowledgement I received was the slight shift of her shoulders, the way a person adjusts when they know someone is watching and they do not want to be the one who speaks first. The first hour was unremarkable. We motored out of the harbor into open water along the coast. The sun was high and the wind was light, and the water was flat enough that you could see the reflection of the hull trailing behind us like a shadow. Colleen opened the champagne at 2 in the afternoon and poured 3 glasses. She raised hers to family, she said. I drank. Jana drank. The champagne was cold and very dry. I checked the compass once out of habit. The needle pointed north. We were heading south-southeast along the coast toward a stretch of coves my father used to anchor in. We anchored at 6:30 in a cove I did not recognize. Colleen poured the last glass of champagne and carried it to where I was standing at the stern rail. Beautiful evening, she said, and then she leaned in close enough that I could smell the champagne on her breath, and she whispered something I will never forget. Say hi to the sharks for me. Her hand hit the center of my back before the last word left her mouth. The stern rail gave. Not the way a railing bends under weight. The way a railing moves when the bolts holding it have been loosened and reattached with hardware that was never meant to hold. I went over backwards. The water was not cold. That was the first thing I registered. 74 degrees, my father would have said. He always knew the temperature of any body of water within 2 degrees. The second thing I registered was the sound of the engine accelerating. They were not turning around. I surfaced. Salt burned my eyes. The stern of the yacht was already 30 yards away and pulling farther. I could see Jana standing at the rail, looking down at the water where I had been. She did not throw a life ring. She did not scream. She turned and walked inside the cabin and closed the door behind her. The wake rocked me twice and then the water flattened. I was alone. My shoes were heavy. I kicked them off and they sank. My phone was in my back pocket, ruined on impact. My father's compass was in my front pocket. It was heavy. Brass and glass and a needle that had been pointing north since 1989. I kept it. I treaded water, and I looked toward shore. I could see the coastline, a dark line with a few scattered lights. 2 miles, maybe less. My father had taught me to swim in the harbor when I was 5 years old. He said the daughter of a captain who could not swim was a liability, and he did not raise liabilities. I started swimming. After 20 minutes, the cramp hit my left calf. I rolled onto my back and floated and waited for it to pass. The sky was going from orange to purple. The first stars were showing. I thought about my father. I thought about how he would have checked the rail bolts himself before every trip because that was the kind of man he was. I thought about Colleen's whisper. I thought about Jana closing the cabin door. Then I saw lights, not shore lights, moving lights. Low on the water, a trawler, a voice over a loudspeaker. You in the water? Stay where you are. Captain Dale Buchanan, 71 years old, Vietnam veteran, pulled me aboard with a boat hook and a grip that could have bent rebar. You fall off a party boat, he asked. Something like that, I said. Dale did not ask many questions. He handed me a wool blanket that smelled like fish and diesel, poured coffee from a thermos into a steel mug, and pointed me toward a bench bolted to the deck near the wheelhouse. The trawler was not comfortable. It was a working boat. Nets stacked on the stern, rust spots on the cleats, a radio crackling with static in the cabin, but it was solid and it was above the water line. And that was enough. You hurt, he said. No. You want to call someone? Yes. He handed me the satellite phone. It was heavy, the size of a brick with a rubber antenna. I called Howard Kessler. He answered on the second ring, which told me he was still at his desk at 9 in the evening, which told me nothing had changed about Howard in 34 years. Mila, he said. I am alive. Colleen pushed me off the yacht. Silence. 5 seconds. 5 seconds is a long time for a man who bills in 6-minute increments. Where are you? He said. I looked at Dale. Dale looked at his GPS display. He read off the coordinates. Howard repeated them back. Do not call anyone else, Howard said. Not the police, not Colleen, not Jana. Why? Because right now, Colleen believes you are dead. If she believes you are dead, she will make moves. She will file claims. She will contact her lawyer. She will access what she thinks she can access. And every move she makes in the next 48 hours will be documented evidence of criminal intent. I understood. My father had trusted Howard for a reason. Give me 48 hours, he said. I will have everything we need. I hung up. I looked at Dale. He was leaning against the wheelhouse door with his arms crossed, not pretending he had not heard. Someone tried to hurt you, he said. It was not a question. Yes. You need to be invisible for a couple of days. 2 days, he nodded. I spent 14 months invisible in a jungle outside Da Nang. 2 days on a fishing boat is nothing. He went back to the wheelhouse without another word. I sat on the bench with the blanket around my shoulders and my father's compass in my hand. The brass was warm from my pocket. The needle was steady. I held it and I watched the coast lights and I did not sleep for a long time. What I am about to tell you is what Howard told me 48 hours later after his forensic accountant and his retired investigator had finished documenting every move Colleen made while she believed I was at the bottom of the ocean. The timeline was precise. Howard liked precision. 7 in the morning the day after I went overboard, 12 hours after I hit the water, Colleen called the Coast Guard to report me missing at sea. 12 hours. She waited 12 hours before calling anyone. 7:42 in the morning, Colleen called her attorney Pritchard. 9:15 in the morning, Pritchard filed an emergency petition with the county court to preserve estate assets on behalf of Colleen as sole surviving next of kin. 11:30 in the morning, Colleen called the insurance company. This was the first of 3 calls she made that day. There were 3 life insurance policies naming Colleen as beneficiary. Not policies my father had taken out, but policies Colleen had taken out on me over the past 14 months. Total payout if I was declared dead, $4.2 million. 2 of those policies were less than 6 months old. 2 in the afternoon. A locksmith arrived at the house. Colleen had him change the lock on my father's study, the study that contained the only physical copies of certain trust documents she knew about. 4:10 in the afternoon, Jana posted on social media, "Please pray for my sister." It was the first time Jana had ever called me sister in public. Howard had a forensic accountant tracing the insurance policies and a retired investigator documenting the locksmith visit, the attorney filings, and the Coast Guard report timeline. Every action Colleen took was photographed, logged, and timestamped. By the second morning, Colleen had filed 2 insurance claims, 1 emergency petition, and changed every lock in the house except the front door, which I suspect she left unchanged because she did not think anyone would be coming through it. Howard called me at sunrise on that second day. I was sitting on Dale's trawler, drinking coffee from the same steel mug, wearing the same borrowed clothes, watching a pelican land on the bow rail. "She has given us everything we need," Howard said. "Time to come home." "I think, Dale," he said, "you do not need to thank me. Just make sure whoever did this does not get away with it." I told him I would. Dale dropped me at a harbor town 40 minutes south of home. Howard sent a car, a black sedan driven by a man who did not introduce himself and did not ask where I had been. Howard's people were like that, efficient and incurious. During the drive, Howard called twice. The first call was an update on the insurance policies. His forensic accountant had confirmed that Colleen had taken out 3 separate life insurance policies on me over the past 14 months, using her position as a household member to access the personal information she needed for the applications. 2 of the policies had been purchased within 6 months of the yacht trip. That alone is a pattern any prosecutor would recognize, Howard said. The second call was worse. Howard's investigator had found something I did not know about. Colleen had been meeting with a second attorney, not Pritchard, for over a year. This attorney specialized in trust litigation. The probate challenge filed months earlier, the one Howard had dismissed as meritless, was only the surface play. Beneath it, Colleen had been preparing a forged codicil to my father's will. The codicil would have added Colleen as a co-beneficiary of the irrevocable trust, entitled to 50% of its distributions upon my death. It was dated 18 months before my father died, notarized by a third party and witnessed by 2 names Howard did not recognize. It was poorly done. Howard said the notarization date conflicts with your father's travel records. He was in Rotterdam on the date the codicil was supposedly signed. But it was done, and it was filed in a drawer in Colleen's attorney's office waiting for the right moment. The right moment was the moment I was declared dead. I sat in the back of the sedan and watched the highway pass in the early light. The compass sat on the center console, catching the glow from the sunrise. My father bought it in 1989 from a retired merchant captain in Galveston. The man told him it would not tell him where to go. It would tell him which way he was already facing. Howard outlined the plan for my arrival. Not police first. First, I would walk into the house while Colleen was there, with Howard with the evidence, in front of witnesses. "Martin will be there," Howard said. Martin was my father's brother. He had arrived that morning for condolences. "And who else?" "That is enough," Howard said. "Martin, me, and you. 3 witnesses. 3 is enough." The house on Breer Point looked the same from the road. White clapboard, dark shutters, the wraparound porch that my father had built the summer I turned 14 because my mother had always wanted one and he had not gotten around to it while she was alive. From the driveway, I could see 2 changes. The porch furniture was new. Colleen had replaced the old wicker set with something modern and gray, and my mother's rocking chair was gone. It had sat in the same spot on the porch for 22 years. White paint chipped on the armrests where she used to grip while watching my father's boats come into the harbor. Now, there was a potted plant in its place. Howard's car was already in the driveway. He had arrived an hour earlier. I got out of the sedan. I was wearing borrowed clothes from Captain Dale, a flannel shirt that was 2 sizes too large, and a pair of work jeans belted with a length of dock line because Dale did not have a belt that fit me. My hair was stiff with salt. I had not showered in 2 days. I walked to the front door. I did not knock. It was my house. I used the second key, the one Colleen did not know I had. The one my father had given me when I was 21 and said, "Keep this somewhere she cannot find it." At the time, I thought he was talking about burglars. I now understood he was not. The front door opened. The hallway smelled like cedar. My father's closet, the one Colleen had not touched, because she said the smell reminded her of him. It was the one honest thing she ever said about my father. I walked through the hallway to the living room doorway. Uncle Martin was sitting on the sofa with a coffee cup in his hand. He saw me first. The cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He did not put it down. He did not stand up. He just looked at me with an expression I have never seen on a grown man's face before. The look of someone watching a person walk out of a place they were not supposed to come back from. Colleen was mid-sentence talking to Martin about memorial arrangements. Flowers, she was saying something about white lilies. She turned, her mouth still forming the word lilies. She saw me standing in the doorway in a dead man's flannel shirt with salt in my hair and my father's compass in my hand. Her mouth closed. She did not say my name. Nobody spoke for approximately 7 seconds. I counted them the way my father used to count seconds between lightning and thunder, not for precision, but for something to hold on to. Martin set his coffee cup down on the side table. The ceramic clicked against the wood. Jana appeared at the top of the staircase. She saw me. She stopped on the 4th step. Her hand went to the railing and gripped it. I walked to my father's armchair, the one Colleen had not moved because it was too heavy, and sat down. Howard entered the room behind me. He was carrying a manila envelope. "Colleen," I said, "I understand you have been busy." Howard opened the envelope. He placed documents on the coffee table one by one, the way my father used to lay out navigation charts, calmly, precisely, with the understanding that every line drawn had consequences. The first document: 3 life insurance policies taken out by Colleen over the past 14 months, listing herself as sole beneficiary. Total payout upon my death, $4.2 million. The second document: Colleen's emergency petition, filed hours after reporting me missing, seeking control of estate assets as sole surviving next of kin. The third document: a forged codicil to my father's will, notarized 6 months before the yacht trip, adding Colleen as co-beneficiary of the irrevocable trust. The notarization date conflicted with my father's travel records. He was in Rotterdam the day the codicil was supposedly signed. The fourth document: the Coast Guard incident report. Time of incident: approximately 7 in the evening. Time of report: 7 the following morning, a 12-hour gap. Howard placed his fountain pen on the table beside the documents and clicked it closed. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "the trust your husband established is irrevocable and contains a spendthrift provision. Even if Mila had died, the assets would have transferred to the Garrett Whitmore Maritime Foundation. Not to you, not to anyone in this room." He paused. "The insurance claims are fraudulent. The codicil is forged, and the Coast Guard has been notified of the 12-hour reporting delay." Colleen's face did not show anger. It did not show fear. It showed something worse. The expression of someone who realizes they have destroyed their life for something they were never going to get. Martin looked at Colleen. Then he looked at the table. He did not pick up his coffee. On the staircase, Jana was crying. She had not moved from the 4th step. Howard slid the forged codicil across the table toward Colleen. "You can keep this copy," he said. "We have the original. If you have ever sat across from someone who smiled at you while planning to take everything you had, you know exactly how this moment felt. The difference between me and a lot of people in that situation is that I had a father who planned ahead. But not everyone does. So, if this story is reminding you of someone in your life, take a breath. And if you have not already, hit that subscribe button. This next part is where things really unravel. The next 40 minutes produced 14 phone calls. I know because Howard logged everyone. At 3:14 in the afternoon, Martin called his wife Carol. He told her what had happened. I could hear Carol's voice through the phone from across the room. She said one word and then she said it again louder. 3:22 Carol called Colleen's sister in Pennsylvania. I do not know what she said, but the call lasted 9 minutes. 3:31 Colleen's sister called Colleen. Colleen did not answer. She was sitting in the same chair, staring at the documents on the coffee table as though they might rearrange themselves into a different story. 3:45 Colleen picked up her phone and called Pritchard. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. Whatever he said, Colleen hung up and set the phone face down on the armrest. 3:52 Jana, still on the staircase, sent me a text message. I felt my borrowed phone vibrate in my pocket. Howard had given me a prepaid phone in the car. Jana had somehow gotten the number. The text said, I did not know about the insurance policies. I swear I did not know. 4:03 Martin called his daughter in Boston. 4:09 Martin's daughter called Garrett's former business partner. 4:14 the business partner called Howard, who let it go to voicemail because he was standing in my living room watching a family disintegrate in real time. Colleen stood up at 4:18. She walked to my father's study without speaking, opened the door with the key she had changed the locks to accommodate, stepped inside, and locked it behind her. The study door closing was the only loud sound in the house that afternoon. Martin turned to me. Did you call the police? Not yet, Howard explained. Police involvement would come, but first he needed Colleen's attorney to arrive so that every conversation was witnessed and documented. This was not about revenge. This was about making sure every piece of evidence was handled in a way that a district attorney could use. I sat in my father's armchair and listened to the house fill up with phone calls and silences. The armchair was the only piece of furniture in the living room that was exactly where my father had left it. Colleen had moved everything else. She had not moved this chair because it weighed 140 pounds and she could not lift it alone. My father always did build things to last. Jana came downstairs 20 minutes later. She did not walk into the living room. She sat on the bottom step of the staircase, which put her in the hallway with a clear view of the living room, but outside its perimeter, as though she had not yet decided whether she belonged inside or outside of what was happening. Her eyes were red. She had been picking at the carpet on the step, pulling at a fiber with her thumbnail the way she used to do when she was 19. I knew about the yacht, she said, looking at the carpet, not at me. She told me the morning of. She said we were going to scare you, make you agree to modify the trust. She said it would be like a negotiation, that you would be frightened and you would agree to give her a larger share, and then we would come back and everything would be normal. She paused. I did not know about the railing. I let her speak. I did not interrupt. Howard was standing by the dining room door, not writing, but listening in the way attorneys listen, with a stillness that records everything. When you went over the side, Jana said, my mother told me to go below deck. She said it was an accident. She said you would swim to shore. She said people swim to shore all the time. And you went below deck, I said, and poured yourself a glass of champagne. Jana looked up at me for the first time. Her face was not defiant. It was not apologetic. It was the face of someone who had just heard the truest sentence ever spoken about them and did not have a single word to put against it. I know, she said. I did not forgive her. I was not ready for that, and I was not sure I would ever be. But I looked at her sitting on the bottom step, picking at the carpet, 34 years old and still sitting where her mother told her to sit, and I said the only thing I could. You are 34 years old, Jana. At some point, my mother told me to stop being an explanation. She nodded. She did not argue. She went back upstairs. That was the beginning of something for Jana. I did not know what. But it was the first time I had ever seen her nod without looking at Colleen first. Pritchard arrived at 4:47. He drove a silver sedan and carried a leather briefcase with monogrammed initials on the clasp. He was the kind of attorney who looked like he had been born wearing a tie. He walked through the front door without knocking, which told me Colleen had given him a key at some point during the past year, a detail that bothered me more than it should have. He saw me first, then he saw Howard standing by the dining room door. Then he saw the manila envelope and the documents still spread across the coffee table. His face did something complicated. It was not surprise exactly. It was recalculation. The expression of a man who has been building a case for 14 months and has just watched the foundation crack. "Mr. Pritchard," Howard said, "I believe you and I should speak privately." They stepped into the dining room. Howard closed the door. I sat in the armchair. Martin sat on the sofa. Neither of us spoke. Through the wall, I could hear Howard's voice, low, steady, the cadence of someone reading a list. He was presenting the evidence package, the insurance policies, the forged codicil, the notarization discrepancy. After 12 minutes, the dining room door opened. Pritchard walked out alone. He crossed the living room without looking at me or Martin and went to the study door. He knocked. Colleen let him in. The door closed. We heard voices. Colleen's voice was sharp, climbing in pitch. Pritchard's voice was a murmur. Whatever he was telling her, she did not want to hear it. After 10 minutes, Pritchard came out of the study by himself. He walked to Howard. "My client is willing to discuss a resolution," he said. Howard did not blink. "There is nothing to discuss, Mr. Pritchard. The insurance fraud and the forged codicil are criminal matters. We are not the ones who decide the resolution. The district attorney is." Pritchard looked at me. He looked at the front door. He picked up his briefcase. "Good evening," he said to no one in particular, and he walked out. His car started in the driveway. Headlights swept across the living room windows. He was gone. Martin turned to me. "Did he just leave?" "Yes," I said. Without talking to Colleen. Martin leaned back on the sofa and rubbed his face with both hands. "Your father always said Colleen had expensive taste in everything except attorneys." It was the first thing that had made me almost smile in 3 days. Colleen came out of the study 6 minutes after Pritchard left. She stood in the doorway with her chin up and her back straight, the way she always did when she wanted you to know she was not afraid. But her hands were shaking. They were the only honest part of her. She looked at me and said something I did not expect. "Your father chose you over me every single day for 18 years. Even after he died, he chose you." She did not deny what she had done. She did not apologize. She stood in the frame of my father's study door, surrounded by his maritime law books on shelves she had never touched, and she said what she had apparently been thinking for a very long time. "I spent 18 years in this house, and I was never allowed to own a single thing in it. Not a painting, not a bank account, not even the right to call myself a Whitmore without someone reminding me it was his name first." Martin shifted on the sofa. He did not speak. "I was 40 years old when I married your father," Colleen said. "I was an event planner from Bridgeport who decorated other people's parties. I walked into this house and I thought finally I am somewhere. And then he died and I found out I was a guest. I was always a guest. I listened. I did not interrupt. Not because I owed her the courtesy, but because I wanted to hear it. I wanted to know what a person tells themselves to justify pushing someone into the ocean." She finished. She waited as though she expected me to argue. I stood up. "Colleen, I understand that you felt you had nothing, but you had a stipend, you had a home, and you had a stepdaughter who kept your lights on because her father asked her to." I paused. "What you offered was not enough. It is never enough for people like you." I watched her absorb the sentence. I watched her realize this was not the beginning of a negotiation, but the end of one. Martin stared at the floor. He held his coffee cup again, yet had not taken a sip. The house was utterly quiet. Through the window behind Colleen, I could see the harbor. The first lights were appearing. I counted them without meaning to, a habit inherited from my father, who always counted the lights at dusk because it told him how many boats were still out. 7 lights, all accounted for. I told Howard to proceed. He made 3 phone calls from the dining room with the door open. I could hear every word, and I knew Howard intended it that way. The first call was to his office. He instructed his paralegal to prepare a criminal referral to the district attorney's office for the following morning. Insurance fraud, 3 counts. Forgery of a testamentary document, 1 count. Reckless endangerment, 1 count. The second call was to the trust administration line at the bank that held the separate account funding Colleen's stipend. Howard cited the trust's material breach of the good faith clause and directed the bank to suspend all distributions effective immediately. Attempted physical harm to the sole beneficiary, he explained, qualified as a material breach under any reasonable interpretation of the provision. The third call was to a property management firm. Howard requested a formal 30-day notice to vacate, addressed to Colleen Whitmore for the residence at Brier Point. Each call removed a layer. Colleen sat on the edge of the sofa and listened to her world shrink with every sentence Howard spoke. Money, home, legal standing, 3 calls, 9 minutes. Martin came to me after the calls ended. He stood by the window where the harbor lights were still coming on. "Your father would have handled this the same way," he said. "My father would not have needed to," I replied. Martin nodded. He put on his coat and left. He had done what he came to do, bear witness. That was enough. I walked through the house alone. Through the dining room Colleen had redecorated with curtains I had not chosen. Through the kitchen where she had made coffee every morning for 2 weeks with a smile that was never genuine. Through the back door to the garage. My mother's rocking chair was there behind the snowblower under a green tarp. Dust covered the seat. Cobwebs clung to the armrests where the white paint was chipped. I pulled the tarp off. I carried the chair through the back door, through the kitchen, through the front hallway, and out to the porch. I set it down in the same spot where it had sat for 22 years. It was not a dramatic gesture. It was simply putting something back where it belonged. I sat down. The boards creaked under the runners. Salt air drifted off the harbor. The compass was in my pocket. I did not take it out. I did not need to check which way I was facing. Over the next 3 days, my phone rang more than it had in the previous 3 years combined. Garrett's sister, Aunt Marjorie, called first. She lived in New Hampshire and had not visited the house since my father's funeral. "I never trusted that woman," she said, a sentence people utter after the fact that means very little and costs nothing. But then she added, "I am sorry I was not paying closer attention, Mila." That one I believed. Colleen's brother called on the second day. He was loud and angry and told me I was framing his sister, that she would never hurt anyone, and that I should be ashamed. I let him speak for 30 seconds. Then I hung up. Some conversations are not worth the electricity they consume. The regular yacht captain, Captain Engel, the one Colleen had replaced for the trip, contacted Howard directly. He said Colleen had canceled him 3 days before the scheduled departure and told him she had hired a private crew for a smaller trip. He found it unusual because he had captained the Whitmore yacht for 11 years and had never been replaced. He was willing to testify. Howard told me the 2 crew members Colleen hired had left the state. No employment records, no captain's license on file. They had been paid in cash. Howard's investigator traced one of them to a marina in South Carolina, where he was working under a different name. The other had not been found. "Legitimate crew do not get paid in cash and disappear," Howard said. On the 3rd day, a local newspaper ran a short article. The headline mentioned a maritime crisis and an incident at sea. I did not read past the headline. Howard handled the press inquiry with a 2-sentence statement and a request for privacy. I went to the office, my father's company. The operations floor was quiet when I walked in. People looked at me, then at their screens, then at me again. My operations manager, a man named Decker who had worked for my father since I was in high school, walked up to my desk. "We heard," he said. "What do you need?" "I need the quarterly report on my desk by Thursday." He looked at me the way Dale had looked at me on the trawler, the expression of someone who has decided not to question your method of surviving. "Thursday," he said. "You will have it." The 30 days passed the way weather passes, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, always forward. Colleen packed. She did not ask for help, and no one offered. She moved through the house with cardboard boxes and packing tape, room by room, filling each box with the things she had accumulated in 18 years of being Mrs. Whitmore. I saw the boxes stacked in the guest wing hallway when I came home from work each evening. They were labeled in Colleen's handwriting, neat, precise, the penmanship of a woman who had spent her career writing place cards for other people's tables. She took things I expected, her clothes, her jewelry, the books she kept on the nightstand. She took things I did not expect, the champagne glasses from the yacht, the olive jar from the cooler, the guest towels she had monogrammed with a W when she first moved in. She was taking the symbols of a life she had curated piece by piece, the way you dismantle a stage set after the show closes. On day 12, Jana came to find me. I was in my father's study reviewing trust documents with Howard over the phone. Jana knocked. She waited until I waved her in. "I am moving out," she said. "I found a studio apartment in the city." I set the phone down. "Your mother's apartment?" "No, my own. I found it on Monday." This was significant. In 34 years, Jana had never lived anywhere that Colleen had not chosen for her. "I am going to get a job," she said. "A real one." She held out her phone. On the screen was a portfolio, graphic design work, logos, brand identities, packaging layouts. The work was clean and confident in a way that Jana herself had never been allowed to be. "My mother never let me show this to anyone," she said. She said Whitmore women did not need to work. I looked at the portfolio. It was good. Not adequate. Good. The branding pieces in particular had a clarity that reminded me of my father's navigation charts. Everything in its place, every line intentional. "That portfolio is strong," I said. "Lead with the branding pieces." She looked at me. She was waiting for something more. Forgiveness, maybe, or at least warmth. I did not have either to give. Not yet. But I had given her the only thing I was certain about, a professional assessment delivered honestly. That was the bridge I could build. She would have to decide whether to cross it. On day 28, Colleen's last boxes were in the hallway. She walked through the empty guest suite one final time. I was not in the house when she left. I was at the office reviewing the quarterly numbers Decker had delivered on time. Some goodbyes are better left unheld. Howard called on a Tuesday morning. I was at my desk, which is where I receive most news, good or bad, because that is where I spend most of my time. "The district attorney has reviewed the evidence," he said. "Charges are being filed. Insurance fraud, 3 counts. Forgery of a testamentary document, 1 count. Reckless endangerment, 1 count. The attempted murder charge," Howard explained, "was more difficult. The physical evidence of the railing being tampered with was circumstantial. The bolts had been removed and reattached with weaker hardware, but it was difficult to prove who had done the work. The 2 crew members had not been located for questioning. But the reckless endangerment charge carries weight," Howard said. "Combined with the insurance fraud pattern and the forged codicil, the picture is clear enough." Captain Dale Buchanan provided a written statement to the district attorney. His testimony about finding me in open water, my physical condition, the timeline, and the absence of any distress call from the yacht all corroborated my account. The arraignment was held on a Thursday. Colleen pleaded not guilty. I did not attend. I read about it in the local paper the following morning at my kitchen table over a cup of coffee that was growing cold. The article was 4 paragraphs. It mentioned the yacht, the insurance policies, and the forged codicil. It did not mention the sharks. Colleen's world had collapsed in concentric circles. Her attorney had withdrawn. Her family was divided. Her brother still defended her. Her sister in Pennsylvania no longer returned calls. She was living in a rental apartment on the other side of town, paying rent with savings that would not last long without the stipend. Howard and I spoke once more that week. He said something my father might have said. "We have charted the course. Now we let the current do the rest." My father never trusted the current. I said he always kept his hand on the wheel. Howard was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your father was a careful man, but he also knew when to stop steering and let the vessel settle." Another pause. "You have done the hard part, Mila. Let the law do its work now." I put the phone down. I looked at the compass on my desk. The needle pointed north, the way it always did. I picked it up and put it in my pocket and went to work. The last piece fell into place 3 weeks before the trial date. Howard's investigator located the notary who had certified the forged codicil. She was 26 years old, lived in a town 40 minutes inland, and had been paid $2,000 in cash by Colleen to notarize a document she knew had not been signed by the person whose name appeared on it. The notary cooperated with the district attorney in exchange for reduced charges on her own involvement. She provided text messages from Colleen arranging the meeting, photographs of the cash payment. Colleen had counted it out on the notary's kitchen table, and a recording she had made on her phone during the transaction. She said she made the recording just in case. Howard told me about it over the phone. She was 26 and scared. He said Colleen told her it was just a formality that the family all agreed no one would ever look at it twice. And she believed that. She believed the $2,000. Howard said people usually do. The evidence from the notary was devastating for Colleen's defense. The forged codicil had been created 6 months before the yacht trip, which meant Colleen had been planning the sequence for at least half a year. The warmth, the coffee, the spa weekends, the suggestion of the yacht trip, all of it was scaffolding around an event she had been constructing since before the leaves changed. 6 months. She had been building toward the moment she whispered in my ear while bringing me coffee and calling me sweetheart and raising a glass to family. Howard called again the following week. There is a plea negotiation happening. Her public defender recommended she take it. I looked at the compass on my desk. What are they offering? 5 to 8 years for the fraud charges. Reckless endangerment concurrent. She would serve 4 with good behavior. Is that fair? Howard was quiet for a long time. Fair would be her understanding that she tried to kill someone for something she was never going to inherit. He said, I do not think any sentence teaches that. Colleen took the plea deal on a Wednesday morning. I found out at lunch. I finished my sandwich. Then I called Howard and thanked him. Then I went back to work. Some things do not require a ceremony. They only require an ending. The sentencing was brief. 5 years, eligible for parole after 3, insurance fraud, forgery of a testamentary document, reckless endangerment, concurrent sentences. I did not attend. Martin did. He called me afterward from the courthouse parking lot. His voice was tired. She looked small, he said. I did not ask him to elaborate. I knew what he meant. Colleen had always filled a room. She was the kind of woman who walked in and rearranged the air. In a courtroom, in a jumpsuit, without the house and the name and the champagne, she was just a 58-year-old woman who had made a choice she could not take back. Thank you for going, I said. Someone from the family should have been there, Martin said. Even for this. I hung up and sat at my desk for a long time. I did not feel joy. I did not feel relief. Exactly. I felt the specific kind of emptiness that comes when something you have been carrying for a long time is suddenly gone and you have not yet figured out what to do with the space it leaves. I worked until 7 that evening. The office was empty by 6. The cleaning crew came through. I could hear the vacuum in the hallway. I finished the report I was working on, turned off my desk lamp, and drove home. The house was quiet. It had been quiet for weeks. No Colleen in the kitchen, no Jana on the staircase, no coffee on the counter in the morning, just rooms and furniture, and the cedar smell of my father's closet. I sat on the porch in my mother's rocking chair. The harbor was dark except for the lights. I counted them. 9, 10. All accounted for, the same number as every night. My phone rang. Yana. I got the job, she said, at a design studio in Portland. I start Monday. Congratulations, I said. Lead with the branding pieces. She was quiet for a beat. I know you do not owe me anything, Mila. I know. Another beat. Good luck in Portland, I said. I meant it. Not warmly, not coldly, just factually, the way my father would have said it. Some bridges are not built with warmth. They are built with the honest assessment that the person on the other side has the capacity to cross. I hung up. The rocking chair creaked on the porch boards. Salt air stirred as the stars began to show. 6 months later, I activated the Garrett Whitmore Maritime Foundation. It was not required. The Trust's successor beneficiary clause had designated the foundation as the recipient in the event of my death. But I was alive and the trust remained in my name. I activated it because my father had built it into the structure of his estate for a reason, and because I finally understood what that reason was. The foundation funded maritime safety training for commercial fishing crews along the coast, training in emergency protocols, equipment maintenance, weather navigation, and open water survival. The kind of training where knowing or not knowing could mean the difference between someone's father coming home or not. The first scholarship was named after Captain Dale Buchanan. Dale attended the announcement ceremony. It was held outdoors near the docks with bunting in maritime blue and white. He wore his only suit, navy, slightly too big in the shoulders. He shook my hand with the same grip that had pulled me out of the water. Your father and I never met, he said. But I think we would have gotten along. He would have asked you about your boat, I said. He always asked about the boat first. Dale smiled. It was the first time I had seen him smile. Howard was there. He stood near the back, leaning against a piling, looking like a man who had finished a very long job and was finally allowing himself to be tired. He was retiring the following year, 40 years of trust law, estate litigation, and Whitmore family business. He came to me after the ceremony. Your father's last instruction to me was make sure she does not need me, and you do not. Later that week, I drove to the cemetery. Garrett Whitmore, beloved father, husband, captain. The headstone was plain granite the way he wanted it. No flourishes, no nautical motifs. Just his name and his dates and a single line he had chosen himself. Leave the dock clean. I placed the compass on the headstone. The brass caught the afternoon sun. The needle swung and settled. Then I picked it back up. I was not done with it yet. I drove home. On the way, I passed the marina where the yacht was still docked. I had not sold it. I had not used it. I slowed down and looked at it through the driver's side window. White hull, dark trim, stern rail replaced. Someday I would take it out, when the water felt like my father's water again. Not yet. Evening. I sat on the porch in the rocking chair. The harbor spread out below the house, the way it always had. The way it had when my mother watched it, and the way it had when my father counted the lights, and the way it would after I was gone and someone else sat in this chair and looked at the same water. I took out the compass, opened it. The needle swung. A small hesitation, the way a compass needle does when it is recalibrating after being moved. Then it settled north. My father said once that a compass does not tell you where to go. It tells you which way you are already facing. I had carried that sentence in my head for years before I understood it. He was not talking about navigation. He was talking about knowing who you are before someone else tries to tell you. I closed the compass, put it back in my pocket. The yacht was visible from the porch, a white shape at the marina, lit from underneath by the dock lights. The stern rail had been replaced with marine-grade hardware, bolted, welded, and inspected twice. Howard had arranged it. Someday I would take it out. I would pack the old red cooler myself. No champagne, just sandwiches and root beer, the way my father used to. Someday when the water was mine again. The harbor lights came on one at a time, the way they did every evening at this latitude, this time of year. I counted them the way my father counted them. 7, 8, 9, 10. All on, none missing. The rocking chair creaked on the porch boards. The boards creaked against the joists my father had nailed himself. Salt air moved through the porch screens. The stars were showing. Not all of them. Just the first ones, the ones bright enough to show through the harbor light. 10 lights, the same number as every night. I closed the compass and put it back in my pocket and listened to the boards creak under the chair and the water move against the docks. And I did not count anything else because there was nothing left to count. Thank you for staying with me through this one. If Mila's story reminded you that preparation is the truest form of protection, or if it made you think about the people who quietly have your back, I would love to hear about it in the comments. And if you have not already, take a moment to subscribe. There are more stories in the description below. And every single one of them is about someone who refused to disappear. I will see you in the next one.